I hate it when you Ron Paul supporters constantly compare Ron Paul to Ronald Reagan. I admit there are some similarities between the two, especially on economical issues such as the freedom of the market and the limitation of government taxes and programs, and fiscal responsibility, which are all great, and should be further institutionalized into the American way of life. But to be perfectly honest, truthful with you guys, that is where I see it all end. There are no more or very few other similarities between the two. Ron Paul, you see, wants to isolate America from all foreign political affairs. He believes America should just not give a damn on what is happening overseas. Ron Paul supports a full military withdrawal from all countries where our servicemen and women are stationed. He believes we should return to our George Washington roots of isolationism when it comes to our foreign affairs. Ronald Reagan, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. Ronald Reagan was in no way ever an isolationist when it came to foreign affairs. Before his negotiations with the Soviet Union, Ronald Reagan called the Soviet Empire an evil empire and was determined to build a strong national defense system. During the Reagan years, America spent hundreds of billions of dollars on military contracts because it was believed that was the only way to accomplish world peace, to keep the world balanced. Reagan also authorized the Central Intelligence Agency to train many overseas anti-socialist groups. For example, under Reagan, the CIA trained an army of 10,000 Nicaraguan freedom fighters to combat the socialist, I think it's the FSLN or something, because it was believed they possessed communistic ties. Would Ron Paul ever fund 10,000 militants? No. He could care less who runs a foreign country, even if they do possess a threat to American interests. Ronald Reagan also ordered a military offensive of 10,000 or so U.S. Army personnel on the Caribbean island of, I think it is Grenada or something, to combat a would-be socialistic takeover by Marxist militants. Would Ron Paul ever do such a thing? Honestly. No. Again, Ron Paul believes this will only lead to more problems. As for the Middle East, Reagan always pledged support for the Jewish state of Israel, something Ron Paul is highly against. Ronald Reagan also deployed numerous troops to Lebanon and executed bombings on Libya for funding terrorist organizations. Ron Paul, on the other hand, well, you know the story. I know. I'm being a bit too biased now. Let me just mention that Reagan did in fact support diplomacy, but that was after Gorbachev took control of the Soviet Empire. People understand that the only reason Reagan straightened out our ties with the Soviet Union was because Gorbachev to Reagan was a moderate who could revolutionize the Soviet system, and which he did, and America won as a result. America won the Cold War thanks to Gorbachev's modernization of the Soviet Union. But let me ask you something. Do you know of any moderate death to America jihadist pick that America can truly compromise their differences with? Do you really believe America can compromise with a guy like Ahmadinejad, who believes he was sent by God to bring upon Judgment Day? Please. Okay. The other contradiction between the two is a simple one, and the last one for this video, which is the fact that Ron Paul supports the legalization of drugs, while Ronald Reagan declared a war on drugs and spent hundreds of millions of dollars in the process. If you ask me, the only drug that should in fact be legalized is marijuana, because the prohibition of it is truly a joke and a waste of taxpayer dollars. Other drugs, hardcore drugs, I just can't imagine going to my local grocery store and asking for a shot of heroin. That's just chaotic and funny in the process. Look, the main difference between alcohol and hardcore drugs, people, I understand both are addictive. But hardcore drugs such as heroin are much more, way more addictive. Because one shot of heroin and you're done. You're addicted. That's why we should only decriminalize the light stuff, aka marijuana, and save some taxpayer dollars in the process. And also, with hardcore drugs, there is a higher probability of overdose and death than with alcohol. Please, I know people die of alcohol poisoning and drunk driving every day. I just said a higher probability. I never said no probability, okay? Now, you know what? Fuck this. I'm done. Fuck this. I'm tired and I'm done. Peace out. Boy.